foremost, you all need to be so proud of this museum. I travel around a lot, and I travel around a lot looking for postcards, postcard hunting, right? And I come across a lot of museums and a lot of historical societies. This is a gem, and I think it's a well-kept secret. So our job, one of our challenges, is to get the word out and let people know that Senoia Historical Society has got a beautiful museum that really details some incredible history that y'all have. So do be proud of what you represent in this organization. So I won't give you a big rundown of my life history because you're going to see it in the presentation actually. But I will tell you how I got here tonight, which is kind of a weird story, but you know what? I'm here. My day job is working for the American Red Cross. I raise money for the Red Cross. And we do something once a year called Sound the Alarm. We spearhead specific neighborhoods around the U.S. where we go in and we install, free of charge, smoke and fire detectors in underserved neighborhoods and in homes of folks that don't have a smoke and fire detector. So about a year ago, April, I was doing an installation down or over in near Noonan, and I love doing it. It's great. Folks are so appreciative of the fact that people care enough to do this for them. And we go into some pretty rough neighborhoods and we install free of charge smoke and fire detectors. And we don't just put one in, we put 2 or 3 in, as many as they want. And we spend time with them really reinforcing the importance of them exiting their home if there is a fire quickly. So that was done, and I'm like, wow, here I am in Noonan, but what's this Senoia place? So I Google Senoia Historical, and up pops your historical society. So I came here on a Saturday afternoon, because you're open on Saturdays, and the executive director, Maureen, who is absolutely delightful and a gem. And the very first question I usually ask is, are there any postcards for sale? She goes, well, we kind of do, but walked through, got the whole deluxe tour, and she actually sold me some wonderful postcards that afternoon, which I wrote a check to the Historical Society in gratitude. So I was telling her about a presentation I was making in Boca Raton, Florida, to the Antique Society down there. And she's like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. Let me know how it goes, and let's keep in touch. So I kept in touch, and here I am. So I'm going to start the presentation. First of all, a few rules. There really are no rules, all right? If you want to ask a question, since we're a small group, raise your hand anytime during the presentation. Whatever the question is, my logic is no questions too small, no questions too silly. Okay? The only thing I won't give you tonight is my social security number, but that's okay too, because it's not going to happen. But anyway, please feel free to ask as many questions as you want as we go along. We will have room at the end also for question and answers. Okay? So the title is Postcard Collecting 101, from 0 to 47,500 and counting in some 60 plus years. I'm very, very proud of that number. It's out of control. That's all I can tell you. But here we go. We're moving along here. How did it start? Well, I'm a Jersey boy. I was born in New Jersey. From my bedroom window as a kid, I watched the upper floors of the World Trade Centers being built. We're that close to New York City. So I was born December 25th. I'm a Christmas baby, which I hate, but that's beside the point. Raised there for 16 years, and then when I was 16, my folks did the unforgivable. They yanked me out of my high school and moved us to Florida. And you'll hear about that as we move along the presentation. There's my postcard from my home state of New Jersey, and that's the municipal building in Union, New Jersey. It's a township. There's a few zillion people that live there, but that's what you get in New Jersey, right? Well, we would make an annual pilgrimage to Florida every year. My mom and dad were married in 1950. They honeymooned in Florida. And my dad loved to go back to Florida every year for vacation. So my dad worked very, very hard. He had an Italian-American heritage pastry shop in North Jersey. He worked a lot. So his big thing was to take this 3-week vacation, head to Florida, and just watch the waves crash ashore right on the beaches. So that's what we did every year. And it was an incredible childhood growing up. I have wonderful, wonderful memories of our trips to Florida. First couple of years, we did it by train, and then Dad got brave and said, we're gonna drive. We're gonna do this by car. So we started to do it by car, and he liked to do it in 3 days, and he liked to stop early at the motel, and we can have a little time by the pool, go swimming, and all that. And this is motel, right? This is motel, not necessarily a hotel. And back then, as a kid, I would run into the motel room and open up the center drawer and pull out the free postcard. That's how the collection started. Believe it or not, I don't know what was going through the mind of a kid who was somewhere between 5 and 10 years old that he had to get the free postcard, but I did. And so there are several of those postcards in the collection that date from the mid-1960s. Those are the humble beginnings of the collection. Of course, driving from New Jersey to Florida, you go through Delaware, you cross the Delaware Memorial Bridge from New Jersey, you go through Maryland and Baltimore. Dad liked to get up super early on the first day because he didn't want to get stuck in the Washington, D.C. traffic. So we would leave New Jersey at 4:30 a.m. and God knows we were well beyond Washington, D.C. by the time their traffic kicked in, their morning traffic. But a lot of these postcards date back to those days of our trips along the way. Of course, Washington, D.C., and Mount Vernon, Virginia. We're kind of moving our way down I-95 now. And back then, a lot of I-95 still wasn't complete. So you got off and went on the U.S. highways for a little bit until you found your little niche. Our first stop was usually North Carolina, somewhere south of that Virginia-North Carolina border. So that also holds some very specific memories. But of course, any of you who have traveled that route, you start to see the billboards for south of the border. Now, we're gonna take a little sidebar here. This is pre-Disney, right? Disney World wasn't open yet. So something like south of the border that said, Pedro is waiting for you. It's only 200, it's kind of like Buc-ee's now, right? Yeah. Pedro's waiting for you. It's only 200 miles to south of the border. So those postcards are quite special. Moving our way now south to Georgia. For some reason, Dad just had this thing, because it took a while for Georgia and South Carolina to complete I-95. And he would always be moaning and groaning, and I wouldn't use another word in his complaining, about the log trucks you got stuck behind on US 301 17 in Georgia and South Carolina. But here's a vintage postcard here of Georgia. And of course, eventually we get to Florida on day 3. We stayed in a motel in Fort Lauderdale. That was quite lovely. We used to stay in Miami, and then it got a little crazy, so we migrated our way up to Fort Lauderdale. That motel is still there, and it is, I don't know who's familiar with Fort Lauderdale, Galt Ocean Mile. It's all these high-rise condos. I mean, 40, 50-story high condos now. We watched many of them being built from the little pool deck of the Cascades Motel. The last year we stayed there was 1971. And Mom and Dad would have the efficiency, because Mom liked to do her, Italian mother, do her cooking, and I didn't have to go out to eat every night. And then we had the motel room, adjoining rooms next door. Back in 1971, that efficiency was $12 a night, and the motel room was $8 a night. So yes, things have changed, haven't they? I do have this closeness to Florida because I spent many, many years in Florida. I spent 21 years in Florida. But truth be told, I've actually spent more time now in Georgia than I did in Florida. But I do have a lot of postcards from Florida. And that's from around the state. Some are vintage, some are more. When we say vintage, there's a really cool handout that you have. And I would say, not necessarily to read it now, but it's something cool to take home. It gives you a really wonderful running history of postcards and postcard collecting. So it kind of like tells you at what phases certain things were happening in the universe as it pertains to postcards. Because many of the vintage postcards that I have, and you'll see some of them, I did bring some show and tell, they are watercolor. Because this predates what now we know as Ektachrome photography. So the watercolor ones actually predate those Ektachrome. So I do have a few of those from Florida. I was very blessed to live I went to high school in West Fort Lauderdale, and I lived in Miami, and I lived in West Palm Beach for a while, and then I also lived in Tampa, St. Petersburg, and of course you'll see where my alma mater is coming up soon. But I did spend a lot of time around the state of Florida, so the pretty comprehensive component of my collection is Florida. Just how do I keep track of all this? I used to count them manually. I don't know, like a kid, I go back to 1972. I have the first manual count of postcards. It was a couple hundred at that time. And then I kept counting and doing it sporadically until it got to like 8,000, where counting them manually was kind of stupid. So I created an Excel sheet. So now everything's on an Excel sheet. It's all there is a method to my madness, and I update that Excel sheet at the end of every month. It works.
John, I do have a question.
Sure.
The bottom right of the previous one, is that the Don Cesar Hotel?
That is the Don Cesar. I lived on Treasure Island for a year, and the Don, it was fabulous. And I lived right, like spitting distance to the Gulf of Mexico. It was my one chance in a lifetime to live near the water, right, or on the water. The only time in that year when it wasn't so much fun was when there was a red tide for a little bit, and that's not so pretty. And there was a tropical storm that I should have left, but I didn't, all right? Anyway, yeah, that is the Don Cesar. Okay, some famous restaurants. I wanted to throw these in. The top one there is Patricia Murphy's in Fort Lauderdale. The other is Creighton's. Some of these names are blasts from the past. They're not around anymore. The Town and Country Diner. In the town where I grew up, because my dad worked really hard, for us to go out to eat was a big deal. And when you went to Town and Country, you were having, that diner was an incredible experience. So those are part of the collection that I'm very proud of. Okay, Walton's Tap Room. I would walk past it a million times on the way to the bus, because I had to take a public bus to get to high school for my first 2 years, because it was 2 towns over. And then one day I decided, well, I wonder if they have a postcard. Well, I will tell you guys and gals, 50 years later, when I walk past a restaurant or a hotel or something, I will always stop in because I'm like, I wonder if they have a postcard. Many do, a lot don't. Because now we take pictures on our phones and we send them to Aunt Ethel and Uncle Fred and we say, wish you were here, versus writing the postcard. Steak and Shake of Gainesville, Florida days, and then the Pelican Diner in St. Pete, which I don't think is standing any longer. But there are some that are really special to me in terms of places to stay and places to eat. Okay, yes, as I alluded to, I am a Gator from the University of Florida. I graduated high school in 1975 and immediately went up to Gainesville. And so some of these postcards are rather dated from Gainesville, Florida days. I did collect while I was in high school and college. So there's some of like Florida Field, the stadium that look nothing like it looks now. So it's kind of cool to have those. So I graduated college in 1979 and majored in marketing. And I knew the whole time I was in college, I wanted to be a buyer for Burdine's department stores, which is now Macy's. And so I really was very, very focused on that. And I got a job with Burdine's on their executive training program, which was pretty cool. My career, up until even now, has been, I count my blessings every day. I thank God for being so good to me and letting me have positions and opportunities in my career that have just been incredible. Phenomenal places, phenomenal things that have been like so far off the beaten path in terms of a job. And I'm very, very grateful for a lot of experiences. So yeah, I was with Burdine's from 1979 to 1993. I got my first international trip, and when it's the company paying for it and it's a business trip, that's not a bad deal. In February of 1984, so I was not 30 years old yet, I was 28 years old, and here I am on a 747 Pan Am flight from JFK to Munich, Germany. So that was pretty spectacular. And at that time, I'm like, ding, 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 ding. Oh, they gotta have postcards. They gotta have postcards. Munich, Germany in February is a little chilly. You get there and the temperatures are around 0. And I'm gonna step away from the mic here for a second. There's about that much snow on the ground when you get there, and there's about that much snow on the ground when you leave, because it's cold and it just snows. So I'm thinking, damn, I'm not gonna be able to get out and do much postcard hunting, but when there's a will, there's a way. You can manage to work your way around that. Well, that trip to Europe in February of 1984, Munich, Germany, Paris, Florence, Italy, and Frankfurt, Germany. Not bad for a business trip for a 28-year-old. I did some good things. I worked. I did work, sort of. Great trip, great postcards. So wait, hold on. June 1984. Europe twice in 1 year. I managed to get on a committee, a product development committee. I was a housewares buyer, and I was what they call tabletop housewares, which is like your everyday dinnerware, glassware, flatware, serveware that's not fine china, crystal, and silver, okay? So I got appointed to a product development committee that said, sure, come to Europe with us for a month. 28 years old, a month in Europe, second time that year. Now that trip started in London, worked its way through Portugal between we flew into Oporto and drove down. We were developing glass, ceramic, serveware, copper, down to Lisbon, Paris for a couple of days. It was spectacular. And I was with a woman, she wasn't my boss, she kind of spearheaded this development committee. Her thing was, okay, we're gonna work hard. She was not the youngest chickadee bunch, but she was like, we're gonna work hard, but we're gonna make sure we're done working at 4 o'clock every day so we can go shopping, right? So God bless her for that, right? And I was in Sicily for 5 days on this trip and then back to Florence. So really, truly blessed to be able to have those type of opportunities. So, are there any questions at this point as we move along? Yes, sir?
What is your favorite?
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is really weird, but since you asked, when I was a Boy Scout and lived in New Jersey, did this in Morristown, New Jersey, which is George Washington's headquarters during the Revolutionary War, for the winter that he crossed the Delaware type thing, right? So quite 1776, I guess, right? Pretty historical. Anyway, I did a 13-mile hike. So I was in 8th grade, I was still in elementary school. I did a 13-mile hike. You talk about like when you're not used to hiking, right? And you're a kid. I was hurting. Got back to the conclusion of that, and I bought the postcards in the visitor shop at Jockey Hollow. I bought about 6 or 7 of them. Fast forward to 2 years ago, where I actually acquired a collection of postcards. There were about 5,000 in the collection that I acquired. But in that group are the watercolor ones from the exact same ones that I have the ectochrome on. And to me, that will always be special, because I'm like, I mean, as a 12, 13-year-old kid, you just hike 13 miles, your body is like aching, and you still needed to get those postcards. So for me, they're really special.
Most of your postcards blank?
Up until 2010, they were all blank. When we were packing up my parents to move them from Central Florida to Decatur, Mom had a box of every single postcard I ever sent her from anywhere I went. So I thought, well, I need to incorporate these into the collection. So since then, I've opened up the collection to cards that are written on. Actually, for monetary value, the ones that are blank are not worth anything. The ones that are written on, stamped, and got a date on them are the ones that they have a value. So I would say now about 15% of the collection are stamped and written on. Some of the ones that I'm going to pass around are those. Yes, sir.
2 questions. One, do you have any from the Tamiami Trail, like alligator wrestling from Florida?
I have the Seminole Village in Hollywood, Florida.
Okay.
I don't have the Tamiami Trail. Are you selling stuff?
No. I probably have.
Always interested.
If I find them in my junk, I'll bring them
Thank
to
you. I would love that. One of my goals is to actually go down to the Everglades and spend time in the Everglades. Even though I lived in Florida for 21 years, I never really spent time doing the airboat thing.
Right.
We're big outdoors folks, so that's part of one of our things on our to-do list. And then to make it to Key West and to visit the Dry Tortugas, Fort Jefferson. I would pass around the albums now, but I think I'm gonna wait, because if I pass around the albums, you're not gonna listen to me. So I'll do that at the end if that's okay. All right? Any other questions?
I have a,
Sure. Well, go ahead, Beth.
okay, so this actually isn't a postcard question, but when you're in Europe as a buyer, were you traveling to small artisan shops to shop for wares? Or?
No.
Okay.
We were traveling to manufacturers, to actual, and some of these incorporated artisans. like we were in Sicily, and Coweta is a very, very famous brand of ceramic ware, and it's hand painted. So we're obviously going back a few years before decals became so much more popular. But when I was in London, I went into the Laura Ashley shop and I purchased wallpaper trim that would go along the top of between your ceiling and your wall. And from that, there's a 33 1/3% rule for copyright infringement. If you have something artwork and you change it beyond 33 1/3%, you're okay, you're safe. So Coweta Artisans took that strip and they produced a line of ceramic ware that literally sold millions of dollars worth. I didn't get a penny of it because that wasn't my thing, but it was amazing. Yes, some other questions?
Do you have the Brown Derby from St. Petersburg, Florida?
No. Do you have one for me?
No, just fond memories.
I'm gonna start salivating here soon. Wow. I have a Brown Derby from Gainesville, I think. Pretty sure, but not from St. Pete. If somebody else had a question. Yes, sir.
I have two, and it might be in here, so forgive me if I didn't read this, but do you have a goal to hit 50,000? And when did postcards start to become predominantly color? Because I see a lot of old postcards that are.
It's on your timeline in terms of when they started to become. It was early, actually. It was quite early. It was in the 19-teens when you started to get the color ones. Okay. Yeah, I do have a goal of hitting 50, and then I'd probably hit that potentially before the end of the year. As crazy as that sounds, I'm actually going to Costa Rica on Saturday for 8 days, and the whole purpose of this was to spend 8 days. Couple nights just relaxing, watching the waves cross the shore. No, we're doing waterfall and zip lining and volcano hiking and all that, and hopefully a lot of postcard collecting. Anybody else?
John, I do have a question, and you may or may not know the answer to this, but you would be closer to an answer than I. That's so intriguing to me that a blank postcard has very little value, but a written on one has more value. Do you know why?
It's because of the date. It's the date. Okay, written on one doesn't. It's the canceled stamp.
Gotcha.
Okay, and you'll see some in here that are from the late 1890s to the early 1900s, and these are ones that I've actually gotten in antique stores for like $1.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're worth a whole lot more. I don't collect because of the value, but if I ever have to put food on the table, one never knows, right? Okay, continuing along. Postcards, they predate greeting cards. So I've got some really great examples here of Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter postcards. Those are the ones that are from the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and they're really spectacular works of art. So that said, I don't want to be accused of being a big tease. We can start passing this one around. These are all, they have like Senso tags on them, so if you try to lift it and put it in your pocket, just saying, the alarms will go off. But yeah, there's some beautiful works of art here that I just love. They're just so precious, and they're all the holidays. I mean, yeah, 4th of July, St. Patty's Day, Valentine's, anniversaries, birthdays. It's just really sweet. Okay, so oldies but goodies, lots of great memories. Airlines, blasts from the past. Airlines that we may have flown or maybe predated us, right? So, this is pretty cool. This is a little on the heavy side, so be careful as you're going through. I have got a postcard from every airline in the world that I've ever flown on. So that's kind of cool. Now, I had to do a lot of work to get them. when I made this presentation in Boca Raton, Florida last fall, I didn't have one from National Airlines. That's the very first time I ever flew. If you all, I don't remember, National Airlines, it was very big between like New York and Miami. The big old Sun King on their tail. And after that presentation, two of the ladies in this group were heading to an antique show in Central Florida, and they actually came across National Airlines postcards that they bought for me. So since then, I have the National ones here. This is kind of cool. There's some airlines here that you're like, oh my God. Some of them are vintage, so they're kind of cool to look at. And also to give equal time, right? I got cruise ships in here too. I'm not a cruise person. I've taken one cruise in my life. I've got a ton in here because I say to folks, oh my God, you know, you're on a celebrity cruise in Europe. Well, you know, you should be able to get a free postcard. So check for me. And they do, and many times they bring me back the postcard. So we've got airlines in here and we've got cruise lines. So I can go ahead and pass this around also. Feel free to, you can pull them out and look at the backs, okay, if you want. I mean, that's okay. The alarms won't go off for those until you put them in your pocket. Just saying. Now, continuing, those are sidebars, discussions. We're coming back to my career, okay? So, first trip to Asia was 1986. I got a promotion back at Burdines, and it was an amazing job. The chairman calls me in his office, and you're always a little nervous when the chairman calls you into his office, right? Or her office. And sit down. He goes like, you know, I want to congratulate you. You're gonna make a dream of mine come true. And I'm like, oh wow. So he tells me all about this incredible project he's putting me on, and he says that we got you going to Hong Kong in 2 weeks. I'm like, whoa. So 1986, I was turning 30. So I was still pretty young, and I had a boss. The trip was going to be to Hong Kong and Seoul and Taiwan, Taipei. And I had a boss who was one of the best bosses of my career. She said, if we're going to spend this type of money to send you to Asia, you have to spend some time in Tokyo. Because Tokyo is one of 5 cities in the world that really dictates fashion and trends, and we're not going to send you to Asia without you spending time in Tokyo. I'm like, sounds like a good plan to me. So yeah, my first trip to Asia was pretty spectacular, guys. The first stop was Tokyo, and of course, you know, it takes a while to get over all that jet lag stuff. Who has been to Asia? All around? Anywhere in particular? You can scream it out.
Japan, Thailand, Indonesia.
Okay, great. Pretty much. No. Oh wow, so Southeast Asia. Nice. So that trip was Tokyo, and it was Seoul, South Korea, and it was Taiwan. And the coup d'etat, as I say, is Hong Kong. Hong Kong is one of my favorite cities in the world. And I just love that whole East meets West, that true fusion of Asian, European, and American cultures converging on this little dot, right, of Hong Kong. I have been blessed to have gone back several times, many times actually, all for business, and lots of postcards. Okay, so I left my life behind in South Florida in 1992. I was tired of Burdines, I was tired of everything and everybody, so I left and I moved to Dallas, Texas. I got a job as a buyer for Pier 1 Imports. And this was an amazing opportunity, because Pier 1, you know, they were global, they were all over the world. spending a lot of time in India and Asia, and Europe, and I was one lucky little kid. Of course, I'm getting older now, so we're moving along here into the 90s. But it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. That was my first foray into India, and then also into other parts of Asia that I had not been to, Thailand in particular. I've been to India 19 times, all for business. I do want to go back. I want to go back as a tourist and experience some of the things that I was not able to experience while working. Pier 1 Imports was great because they gave you the flexibility to visit the palaces and the forts, that they wanted you to immerse yourself into the culture so that you could become familiar with the artisans and the crafts to develop product. My time at Pier 1 was 2 years. It was short. I made a trip around the world for Pier 1, got back to Dallas, they're based in Fort Worth, Texas. My first day back on the job was my last day on the job. They did away with the division while I was gone. So, that all went out the window. And I was like, okay. I really liked living in Dallas and tried to get a job there. It did not work out. But one day, not soon after I lost my job at Pier 1, I get a job from an Indian gentleman who owned a textile company out of India. So go from a corporation publicly traded to a single ownership privately held. And he starts talking to me about, well, I got your name from certain people that knew me. And he's like, I think you might enjoy working for us. And he's describing the job. And it was a product design director for an Indian home textiles, cotton goods for the bed, bath, and kitchen, and wool rugs. Now, I am not an artist, but my time in the department store life, because I didn't talk about this, but I was a store executive, I was a department manager, I was an assistant store manager. So you get a lot of experience putting things together, making a great presentation. And he talks to me about, I would run his 3 showrooms, one in Atlanta, one in High Point, North Carolina, one in New York City, and I would be developing product. So he gives me a salary range that he would be willing to pay me. I never heard of this guy before, right? And he's telling me, giving me a range, and the bottom was $25,000 a year more than I was making at Pier 1. Well, of course, I'm unemployed at this point, so I'm making 0. And he gives me this number. I'm like, oh, I think that would be manageable. So I met him, and I was with him for 3 years. It was an insane operation. His logic was, I pay you, therefore I own you. So I call those 3 years of my life my indentured servant time. I made some good money, and again, I was pushing 40 at this point. So, yeah, not too bad still, right? And I do want to go back to India one day and experience the palaces, the forts, the museums that I was never able to do while working for the Indian maniac, because I was chained to the rugs for 18 hours a day. So that said, I do have a fondness for India. When I finally left, I was there for 3 years. When I finally left and someone would say, oh, let's go for Indian, I would be like, I can't do that. It took a while to detox from that environment, but I'm good. I love Indian cuisine. We go a lot for Indian, and I'm ready to go back to India as a tourist and experience the things. I did get to the Taj Mahal on my 13th trip into India. We were driving from Delhi to Agra, or Delhi to Jaipur, and in doing that, you pass through Agra, which is where the Taj is. That's 3 hours from Delhi. It's not around the corner. And they said, oh, would you like to see the Taj? I'm like, oh, wow. I said, all right, but my first question was, are you ill? Why are you asking me to like not work for an hour? And it was breathtaking. Now, it was 105 degrees that day, and the sweat is pouring down, but you're there. And I'm buying the postcards. So, you know, not a bad deal, right? But India, I've been to many parts of India. Jaipur is the crown jewel of India. It is absolutely fabulous. Agra, of course, Mumbai, Bombay, and Delhi. So I will go back one day and I will continue to buy more postcards. Additional Pier 1 import adventures. That was my first foray into Thailand. So I've been to Bangkok a number of times. I've been to Chiang Mai, and that was absolutely spectacular. And I didn't have much business in Bali, Indonesia. I had a little bit of business, but it was a lot of fun spending a couple of days there. Pretty beautiful. Very fortunate there. Even the Philippines, Manila and Cebu in the Philippines. And then Pier 1 decided to kind of crack open Africa. And the West African Trade Delegation visited Fort Worth, that's Ghana. And Ghana is the first nation in Africa to achieve its independence back in 1957. So it does have a lot of history. So we decided to have a little junket of us visit Ghana. And the sweetest, most loving individuals you want to meet. I lost about 7 pounds in 6 days because the food was indescribably disgusting. I mean, I was having like rice, and that was the best I could do. I did not get sick, so that was good. But the craft, the wood, and the woven, and the pieces that they were generating were just so beautiful. So we ended up actually writing orders and doing business with Ghana. It was all to my advantage, right? And I got some postcards. Okay, Greece. On the way home from India, I had a boss who was like major alcoholic. So she was wanting to make sure that we were able to spend time in Greece so she could drink the Greek wine and kind of, we did have a little business in Greece. Not much, but some. And it was a wonderful wind down from spending 2 weeks in India. So, because once you got to Greece, you could have salads again, which you couldn't have in India because of the water, right? So it was wonderful. I count my blessings for all of this. And now I'm starting to get serious about postcard collecting. I spent a long weekend after our work time in Athens. I was just gonna bum around the city. And the agent for Pier 1, she said, oh, we want to take you to Rhodos tomorrow. You want to go to Rhodos? And I'm like, I didn't want to say, well, I just was going to bum around Athens and have some fun and look for postcards. But she was like, no, we want to take you. So I'm like, okay, we can't bite the hand that feeds you, right? So flying to Rhodes and flying to Lindos is probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to. And it was only a day. Want to go back one day, but it was a wonderful taste of how beautiful the Greek islands could be and the Greek people could be. So that was a wonderful little plus of Pier 1. I was within inches of getting to Istanbul, and it was all set to have that trip on my next visit to Athens. But when I got home from that trip, I lost my job. So I've never been to Turkey or Istanbul. Some additional global adventures in the course of my lifetime. Love Canada. It's a lot of fun. I want to go back. I want to experience some of the wilderness of Canada across the Yukon territories and all. But I have been to the big three, the Quebec and the Montreal and the Toronto. A lot of fun. We went to Ottawa 3 years ago, right when the border opened up. We were supposed to go during COVID, obviously didn't go. So as soon as the border opens up, we're going to do Montreal, Quebec City, and Ottawa. Now Ottawa was really just for postcards, because I collect postcards and I'm pretty fanatical about it. So this is the classic, do your research before you go. We took the train on a Monday morning from Montreal to Ottawa, not realizing it was their Thanksgiving holiday. So everything in Ottawa was closed. Like, okay, well, we're gonna walk around, I guess, and explore, but can't go in anywhere because it's all closed. We did have a Thanksgiving dinner. We found a British pub in Ottawa that had a Thanksgiving dinner for us. Well, then the next day, like in the United States, the bulk of museums, and this is probably not news to you all, are closed on Mondays. That's the day that they're closed. Well, in Canada, they're closed on Tuesdays. So, Thanksgiving, Monday, everything is closed on Tuesday, and Wednesday morning, we're leaving. So, I have a reason to go back to Ottawa now and explore their museums, but it's a pretty cool town, I'll say that. When we go out, when I travel and I'm out at a restaurant and I have a large something, a portion is served that it's going to be apparently too big to consume, I usually put a little aside and I ask for a to-go container with a fork, plastic fork, because inevitably there is a homeless person who has not had food and is hungry. So I like to do that. I like to just go up to someone and make their evening by giving them something delicious and hopefully nutritious to eat. So that happened in Ottawa. We were in an Italian restaurant and we had a bit left over. And we walking back to the hotel. It was quite a walk. It was like a 25-minute walk from the restaurant to our hotel. Not one homeless person in sight. So I get back to the hotel, and at that point I'm ready to throw away to go, because what do you do? And I said, what's up with Ottawa and homeless people? Do you not have homeless people in this city? And they said, well, we do, and they knew from the United States. And they said, but unlike certain countries, we treat our homeless with respect. And we have quadrants where they have roof over their head, they have running water, they have electricity, and they get meals. I was like, lesson to be learned. But anyway, love Canada, pretty cool. Want to get back there one day. Brazil, been to Rio, and this was a number of years ago. It was like 1986, so I was just about 30. And at that point, the collection piece was really kicking in. So I would say right at that 1984, from 1984, I really started intensifying the efforts to pick up on the collection. Rio was quite spectacular. And Mexico. I love Mexico. A buddy of mine who was in the State Department, he and his family were living in Mexico City for 3 years. So for 2 years in a row, another buddy and I went down and visited. We didn't do the Acapulco or the Cancun things because Caesar's from Miami and he gets the sea and beaches all the time. We wanted to do the historical part. So we really opted to do some very serious, not just Mexico City, but also Guadalajara, Guanajuato, and which is Oaxaca, which is absolutely spectacular. So I do want to get back to Mexico one day and continue to explore the interior part of the country. Okay, that concludes the presentation. But the $1 million question is, so what do you do with your postcards? How do you store them? Well, I'm going to pass around these other folders before we answer the question. This photo album is some vintage cartoonish postcards. They're watercolor and they're vintage, so that's kind of cool here. And then there's a whole bunch of miscellaneous. I don't like miscellaneous postcards because it's kind of hard to define where to file them. But the ones that kind of like really stick out in my mind that are kind of unique go in here. And in this lovely toile folder, photo book, are the chateaux of France. So last September, we were able to visit France, and part of the tour was the chateaux of the Loire Valley.
I will take the book now, thank you.
Okay. I will get them to you now.
I'll start the other one in the back.
Oh, perfect, thank you. The, my dad was a World War II D-Day paratrooper. He was 18 years old on June 6, 1944, when he jumped. And we did not know about that for many, many years until he was able to really process it and tell us about it. We knew he was in the war. We knew he was combat wounded in the Battle of the Bulge, but didn't know about the D-Day piece. So I really always wanted to get to Normandy and experience that. And it was a breathtaking experience. Very, very cool. And people say, "Oh, Joe, you're going to be all emotionally, distraught." And actually, I was not. I was very, very grateful to my dad for being as brave as he was at 18 years old. The last album is a COVID project. Imagine that, being stuck at home during COVID days. I decided that, and I had visited some of the presidential libraries, but very small amount. I decided to get the postcards from the presidential libraries of all the presidents of my lifetime. So it starts, well, there's a few miscellaneous ones in here, but it really starts with Eisenhower and works its way through. And it's kind of fun. So I'm going to pass this around.
Are there censors in the French book?
Yeah, there are. The strongest ones are here and there, because I've got like buttons from Harry Truman's campaign. Yes.
How do you decide which cards not to collect?
I say to everyone, any and all are welcome, okay? Because the collection doesn't have boundaries. Honestly, if it's something, an absolute bottle of vodka, and it looks like absolute Venice, and it looks like a building in Venice, Italy, and it goes into miscellaneous, of course, but I do collect all. Okay, so that's a pretty easy question to answer. So, getting back to questions, where do the postcards live? Well, they live in Michael's loves me. Okay, they live in decorative photo boxes from Michael's. So I always try to look at when they've got them on sale, or when they've got that coupon that they send you, and for $3.99 or $2.99. Every postcard has its own individual poly sleeve. So I've got a supplier up in Maryland that I get the sleeves from. She loves me too. And Michael's boxes. Now these are filed alphabetically from left to right, by country, by state, by city. So I've never been diagnosed as OCD, but I'm pretty sure that's a darn good chance I am. So I think I mentioned I'm going to Costa Rica this Saturday morning, and what I did was I was able to go into the Costa Rica piece component and take pictures of the postcards that I have from Costa Rica, so that I don't have duplicates, that I'm not buying duplicates. Now, individuals from all over, they send me postcards, like their parents have passed on. So they're going through mom and dad's place, and they come across postcards. They send them to me. I mean, I get a parcel. So it's pretty amazing. When I do get duplicates, and this is like, it would have to be like an exact duplicate of one that I already have. I've got 2 friends who are educators, and they love the postcards to use as learning tools for their students, for geography, for art, for history, for architecture. And one of them is a special ed teacher for Gwinnett County, and she not only utilizes them as a learning tool, but then the students will write messages to individuals that are in nursing homes, and they'll mail them to those individuals. So I never say never, I never throw a postcard away. It always has a second or third life. So that's kind of cool. The collection's wide open, always looking to keep growing. Yeah, I'm gonna get to 50,000 and then I'll decide what I wanna do, but I'm probably gonna keep collecting beyond that. It's harmless. I say I don't sell drugs to school kids. I don't beat up on old ladies in parks. I just collect postcards. What other questions can I answer for you? Yes, sir.
In a lot of the tourist places now, you don't see basic postcards, you see the accordion things.
Right.
Is that something?
I do have those. They're in 2 of the boxes that, they're alphabetical also, but now they get counted as one.
Wow.
Even if it has 12 images in it, it's because I went through the soul searching on that one, right? Do you count them as 12? Do you count them as 1? You're counted as 1 because on the outside of the casing, that's the indicia for the addressing. So you really only mail it to 1 person, so it gets counted. But I do have those, and I've got some really incredible vintage ones, to the point where if I do open them up, I have to be super careful because the pages are starting to really show their age, and nothing lasts forever. But they're also in their own individual poly sleeve, keeping them in good shape. Any other questions? Yes?
So, in one of these boxes, if you have individual postcards, about how many can you get in a box?
500. I know that because I have attempted to go into the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest postcard collection in the world. The current record is 15,300. Well, we know I have more than that, right? The current record holds at that because the Guinness folks want me to count every postcard on video and send it to them.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so I don't know how to do that. I think it's gonna be a retirement I started the process and I sent them a condensed version of me counting 1 box and then saying, well, I've got 82 boxes times 500, blah, blah. No, that will not suffice. So, I can understand wanting to maintain the credibility of Guinness. I mean, it's been around for several hundred years. So, but I sent out a Facebook post of me kind of dabbing the tears in my eyes, saying, and it was on the table showing how I was trying to count. And I said, well, right now, I know a lot of you have been asking. Right now, the project's on hold. I'm suspending the project until I retire and have more time. You cannot believe how many folks have sent me postcards off of that post. They're all like, oh, and you know, these people are like, a guy that I knew, he lives in Cincinnati now, he sent postcards that were his grandmother's, that people don't know what to do with them. So, enter Joe. I'm more than happy to accept them. And I often say that when I know someone who has lost a parent, especially, and they're going through all the belongings. I'm like, you know, if you want to, because 9.9 out of 10 times, they've got that plastic trash bag and the stuff's getting pitched into the trash. I'm like, if you want a lasting tribute to your mom and dad or Aunt Ethel or Uncle Fred, Send them to Joe. Yeah, you have a question?
How many countries have you visited?
Upwards of 30. And there's a few on the list yet. So Costa Rica next week will be the first time, which will be kind of cool. Yeah.
Do you know if you have any information on the actual process used? We have a few postcards of Senoia from the early 1900s,
Oh wow.
and I'm sure that happened in other small towns too. So, how did that evolve? Where there wasn't anybody locally, I wouldn't think. Was it a regional thing? Or
It was local. Okay. Any of those that, because this is an unusual entity in Senoia because you're not a county seat. So you don't have a courthouse, you don't have a square, you don't have the fountain with the markers or any of that, but you do have an incredible museum. The majority of counties out there across the country, they're extremely localized, and they do have wonderful historical societies. Some of them don't have museums. Some of them are located in a house that are offices that do not have things for sale. But it's all local. And we're talking going back to, in all probability, the late 1860s, early 1870s, when photography started to really become more popular and kicking in. So it's very local.
Okay.
Very local. Yes, sir.
Two questions. One is, you mentioned writing on the back and making the postcard more valuable. Do you have any that are from famous people or a particular milestone in history, like today Pearl Harbor was born?
You know,
And the second question is,
yeah.
what is your social security number?
There you go. No and no. No, as far as I know, I don't have any specific ones from anybody of significance. I think and that's probably another retirement project, to be able to sit down and look at the back of all these going, oh my God, look who this is from. You know, that type of thing. I don't have that. I don't have that knowledge. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What do you see for the future of postcards? Are they gonna die out? Are they gonna continue?
Yeah, they're really, it's really scary, especially in this country. They're more common in other countries, but like colleges and universities, great example. You go to a college that has been around for a while, they've got great architecture. Rice University in Texas, in Houston, great example. Beautiful architecture, not one postcard to be had. And many colleges just don't have that. I did the Hudson River Valley in upstate New York last year, right around this time. I flew into Albany and drove down to New York City and hit all those wonderful towns and villages along the way. Vassar College in Poughkeepsie had a whole spinner of photography, of images of buildings and architectural accents on the buildings that were put onto postcards. The girl working in the bookstore, I think she was getting a little nervous because I was like, oh my God, and she could hear the screams going on. I think she was like, oh, this person's like really weird. Security, we got one for you. That is such an exception, but that's happening more and more. I say to people, oh, if you have a chance, you know, I'd love you to bring me back a postcard. And they're like, Joe, we looked for you and we couldn't find any. Yeah, it's a vanishing. Now, that's little information piece there. Postcards, third in the world in terms of collections, behind stamps and coins. Like, who knew that?
Joe knew that.
Joe knew that, right? Not that long ago. This little shop in Clayton, Georgia, is no longer there. He sold out and retired to Florida. And he's selling his postcards online for an exorbitant amount of money. You know, I stopped at this antique store in Villa Rica, Georgia, about 3 years ago, and this gal was like, oh, can I help you? And I'm like, oh, I'm looking for postcards. And she's like, oh, Granny, this guy wants postcards. So sweet little old Southern lady, absolutely adorable. Come on back here, come on back. So she brings me to the back of the antique shop, and it was like Moses looking at the promised land. I was like, so I'm creating small talk with this lovely lady, and the postcards were fantastic quality. I mean, from all over the world. Her COVID project was she acquired a collection, and her COVID project was to put them all by country and state in little Ziploc sandwich bags, right? Which was cute. And so I'm talking to her, and all of a sudden, and these were not cheap. They were $2, $3, $4, $5 a postcard. And I lost track of this, and I'm like, whoa, stop. I said, I did not bring my last paycheck with me. She goes, they're 50% off. You're gonna be so happy when you get up front. So she was telling me that night she was heading to the Carter Center for a presentation, a documentary on President Carter's presidency. And I said, really? I said, wow. I said, last time I was there was for this fantastic book and author event from a woman who actually served on the White House staff. And she wrote this really great book about the Peanut Brigade when Jimmy Carter was running for president. She goes, that was me. Well, so now we're talking another 20 minutes about all this. We get up front, her granddaughter rings me up, and she says, that'll be $228. I said, but they're half off. She goes, that is the half off. And now I'm too embarrassed to put any back, because my sweet little lady friend is right here. And I'm like, so I hand over my charge card. I get in the car, I was yelling at myself the whole way home, like along I-20, like, how could you be so stupid? Well, it turns out when I got home, calmed down a little bit, for the quantity of cards that I got for what I paid, they ended up being 85 cents each. So I gave her my business card, and a year later she calls me. Hey Joe, this is Dot Paget. I know you're interested in those postcards. We need to make some room in the shop. She goes, I'm willing to sell you the whole collection. I'm like, yeah, right, for $9 million. So I call her back, and I said, well, Dot, I'm giving her the sympathy. You know, I just bought a car, got car payments, I got to write a check to the government for last year's income taxes. She goes, well, come on over, let's talk. I think you're going to be real happy. I'm like, real happy. I get there, and she says to me, there's about 5,000 postcards. She goes, is 17 cents each a fair price? And I was like, I was just foaming at the mouth at that point. So I said, of course. So for about $800, I got 5,000 unbelievable postcards. It took 4 weeks to integrate the 5,000 into my collection. I commandeered, we couldn't have dinner guests for 4 weeks because I commandeered the dining room table, because it's all alphabetized, and it has to be right. And poor Tom, he looks at me like, you really do need some help. But it was an amazing acquisition, and she's just this sweet, sweet lady. So I called her about 4 months later to tell her how much joy she brought me as a postcard collector. And I said, I'd like to make a donation to thank you on your behalf, just to thank you. I said, you have a favorite charity? She goes, this is your lucky day. She said, I'm going to be 95 years old. I want to be half that sharp when I'm 75, right? She goes, and they're throwing me a big party, and it's to benefit the Douglas County Historical Society and Museum. She goes, I would love it if you wrote a check to them. Now, the catch is, it's got to have 95 in it. So, you want to make it 95,000, you want to make it 9,500. So I wrote the check for $95.95. But she was still very, very grateful. So, any other questions before we wrap this up? Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. It has been an absolute joy. I very much appreciate being here. And And if you find you got some postcards laying around that you don't know what to do with, Beth knows how to reach me. And Lynn does also. But it has been a thrill.
Thank you.
I hope I enlightened you a little bit.